Hello, I am the Script Doctor, and welcome to the channel. Well, I was really hoping that at the worst it would be every other episode that was filler, but after seeing Chapter 5, The Gunslinger, well, it appears that filler is the majority of this show. Now, many may think that this series is being episodic. Well, it is and it isn't, and that's the problem. There is an indecisiveness to the structure of the show. Is this a big story about this baby and the Mandalorian on the run? Or is it episodic, where each episode is isolated from one another? You may be asking, why can't it be both? And my reply would be, well, that's what I want to know from the creators. Because so far, they are not treating the show as if it were both. With each episode, it is either one way or the other. And that comes down to pacing. Pacing in the sense of how much information, growth, and development are the characters achieving within each episode. How much more do we know about these characters compared to their introduction? Is it too much information in too little time, or too little information over a longer period of time? I'd argue with The Mandalorian that it is the latter. We are a little over 60% complete with the season, and I can tell you without any doubt the following things about The Mandalorian. He was a foundling. He does not like droids. His reason for not liking droids stems from how he lost his home and family. He cares about others, helping out a baby and a village. He's polite, and he's dedicated to his clan. This is all fairly good information to have about The Mandalorian in your first act, not over halfway into your series. Even in traditional westerns, we get that much information, if not a bit more, or rarely a bit less, within the first act of a story. But do you see what is missing off of this list? It's his want. What does the Mandalorian want? What is his goal? It doesn't appear to be money, and the ending of this episode would prove that. So what is it? What is the point? In Chapter 5, the point of this side story, apparently, is nostalgia. Remember Mos Eisley? Remember Tatooine? Remember carbon scoring? Remember the Cantina? Remember the Dune Sea? Remember Dewbacks? Remember the repair droids? Remember Banthas? Remember Tusken Raiders? Remember the High Ground? Remember Beggar's Canyon? Remember Mos Espa? Yeah, I remember. I also remember all those things having a reason and meaning in their respective stories. Did the writer? Chapter 5 was essentially Chapter 2 again. Only instead of getting parts, it's getting money to pay for parts. In The Gunslinger, which is not appropriately titled, the sniper would be better, or the fraud, or the coward, as neither character that was introduced would qualify as a gunslinger. Anyway, in The Gunslinger, the plot is fairly direct with zero surprises. In a simple story like this, one would expect the characters and dialogue to be really top-notch and captivating. But that is not the case here. The dialogue is direct, on the nose. No fun wordplay, no nuance, nothing that feels unique to each of these characters we are being introduced to in this adventure. They're all very forgettable, which is worse than having bad or wooden dialogue. Forgettable dialogue is what you really want to avoid. A way to do that is by clearly defining the characters you're writing about. Where did they come from? What do they want? Are they stoic or sarcastic? Do they have a few stories that shape who they are today, and if so, what are they? Do they have likes? Do they have hates? These are just some of the questions you pose to yourself when writing a character. When crafting a character, life experiences create a unique voice. Think of the people you know. Any of them have a unique take on a topic? Any of them good at reading people or being street smart? Think about why that is. It may have to do with the amount of experience they have, which gave them a unique worldview. This is how you get lines like,
boring conversation anyway.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Coffee's for closers only.
But in Chapter 5, give me a memorable or quotable line that wasn't used in a previous episode or Star Wars movie. Something that could set this story apart. If you have anything, let me know in the comments, but currently I'm drawing a blank. For the plot, it's not very inventive either. We get a brief starfighter sequence, followed by a very big and over-the-top performance from a mechanic. As our hero doesn't have money to pay for repairs, he heads over to the cantina to find work. While the droid bartender can't help him, a reject from the mid-90s is relaxing in a booth and offers him a partnership on a bounty he needs to collect in order to get into the guild. The Mandalorian agrees, and the two travel on speeder bikes to the middle of nowhere. And here's where it gets convoluted. As they reach the bounty, they learn that she's sniping anyone on approach. The Mandalorian has a plan, but they have to wait until dark. Now, they could have taken the approach of the kid not wanting to wait, and then we get a scene between the two debating why each of their methods is better than the others, but instead the kid agrees, and we do a time jump to night. real entertaining. So now that night has fallen, the two ride out on their speeders towards their target and throw flash charges into the air to obscure the sniper's vision. Why did this have to be done at night? A flash is a flash. Sure, the contrast between light and dark will force the eyes to readjust, but the same would still be true during the day. She's looking through a scope that appears to have a heat signature mode to it and is light sensitive. So if the charge obscures the scope, it doesn't matter if it is day or night, the scope will be useless. The Mandalorian also states that when blinded and with their speed, they have a chance. But he doesn't give any valid reason as to why they had to wait for nightfall. We get our rushing of the gate set piece, and they capture Fennec with little difficulty, only losing a speeder bike in the process. With a ride short, the Mandalorian decides to go find a dewback they passed earlier so they can carry Fennec to town. While he's gone, Fennec tries to bribe the kid with double the bounty if he takes her to Mos Espa. Remember Mos Espa? When the kid reveals that her capture is not about the money, she plays him with the idea of what he really wants: reputation. It's not a twist in any way. It should have been. If there was effort and backstory put into this character, we would be able to enjoy this reveal. But it was obviously put on display with his desperation to get into the guild over getting the pay. Rather backwards for someone going into the bounty hunting profession, wouldn't you say? He should have been trying to hide the fact that it is the reputation the kid is after instead of the bounty. But what we have here is a one-dimensional character trait slapped across our face at the start. We get all of this obvious telegraphing of what's important to this kid, so that once we get to the scene we know what he's going to do beforehand. Your audience is now ahead of the writer, and this is never a good sign. It puts your audience in a waiting game for your characters to catch up to where they are. Which is why if you have complicated characters with unique voices and are fully rounded out, you can either throw a wrench into the predictable nature of the story, or blind your audience with entertaining dialogue and exchanges with other well-developed characters. Here, we know that once Fennec tells him about the Mandalorian, he's going to kill her and try and capture the Mandalorian for himself. We also know he's going to fail because he's been a follower this entire episode. He's shown no guile or plan of action to prove he's capable or even a threat to our hero. As a result, the rest of the episode is a very simple paint by numbers. The bad guy gets a hostage, our hero outwits him, takes the kid's money to pay for the ship, and that's the end. And while simple stories are the stories you want to tell, the way you make them entertaining comes from the characters. All the characters in this episode have on-the-nose, boring dialogue. They're not refined or defined. As a result, their lines are predictable and relatively cliché, and it allows me to impart to you a lesson on avoiding cliché dialogue. Cliché dialogue comes from characters that aren't three-dimensional. It's lines like,
"He's behind me, isn't he?"
He's right behind me, isn't he?
Don't die on me, Bob.
And don't you die on me!
We have company.
We've got company.
If you see or hear lines like this, it means someone stopped trying. The question is, how do you avoid writing cliché lines of this type? How do you get across the intention of the line but make it unique to the character? Well, that starts with doing what I mentioned earlier. Define the character. Round them out. Give them a history that will influence their voice. Think of the people in your lives and what they would say as a response in the situation you've written. If they go with a line that's cliché, they're probably boring and not ones you should be looking at for inspiration regarding your writing. The more specific you make your character, the more specific their lines become. They become unique voices in your story, and they can jazz up your simple adventure with a lot of life. The writer of this episode got the beats, but lost the rhythm. That is probably why there is so much nostalgia in this episode. I counted 12 references from Reflex. Let me know how many you found in this episode in the comments. Sadly, we got another filler episode. One as bad as Chapter 2 because unlike Chapter 4, they at least introduced an idea tempting the Mandalorian away from his bounty hunting lifestyle. Here, there was nothing added to his adventure. He needed his ship fixed. He got it fixed and left. Everything in between does not have any value for our hero. I'm willing to bet that once all 8 chapters are released, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 could be interchangeable during a rewatch of the series and you wouldn't be confused at all. For a long-form story in a series or miniseries, that's not a good sign. You want there to be an order of continuity, and sadly, that opening dogfight that leads him to Tatooine could happen right after Chapter 3 without issue, thus causing him to find a planet without a spaceport in order to hide better after this Chapter 5 episode. There isn't enough in this chapter or in Chapter 4 that requires you to watch those stories in the order in which they aired. Episodic shows are great when each episode doesn't rely on the ones before or after, but The Mandalorian is not telling a story like that. Finally, to address the elephant in the room regarding the last shot, we hear a specific sound cue which I instantly recognized. I'll play it here. I first heard that cue during the Star Wars Special Edition, specifically the Jabba the Hutt scene that was added into this first Star Wars film. I'll play that one here. Those sound cues are identical, and I think it is supposed to suggest that an old bounty hunter is still kicking around. While this is a nice little Easter egg / cliffhanger, it poses a question you don't want to pose when writing a story in an established IP. That question is, why are we following this new character when we could be following a better story about a character we already know and love? So the final question remains. With 3 episodes left, will we get more filler, or will the story finally pick up and go somewhere? What are your thoughts? If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.